Just a small introduction to define about what we are talking about. We are talking about enterprise architecture. So enterprise architecture, what we call also EA, is a discipline that provides methods to define, organize, standardize, and document an organization structure and interrelationships in terms of certain critical business domains characterizing the entity under analysis. So let me take you a study performed by Mega International. It's a global software company. And this company has very recently performed a study on enterprise architecture trends in 2022. According to their results, companies still largely have a vision of enterprise architecture centered on IT, compared to very few of them centered on business. Even worse, very few of the architects surveyed said that they are systematically consulted on company development projects. The study revealed that the main challenges faced by enterprise architects are the difficulties collaborating with their entire organization. When the main purpose of enterprise architecture is to support the organization's business and their transformation, it comes up against difficulties related to collaboration with the businesses and objectives that conflicts with IT projects. Therefore, most of the projects takes longer to set up, risk higher costs than expected, and dependencies between projects are not always managed. These difficulties do not prevent from investing in digital transformation. Main motivations for those investments are the facilitation of information, the improvement of business processes, and cloud architectures. Automation and reinforcement of artificial intelligence are the two main arguments put forward by respondents for obtaining funding. We can conclude that in their strategic role to support the business in an increasingly digitized world, enterprise architects are more than ever the essential link between IT and business and the leaders of digital transformation for organizations. We invite you today to enter these challenging domains through 5 dimensions: maintaining and developing hybrid environment, combating cyber criminals, driving change, competition for talents, framework, and methodology. Each dimension will be addressed by our 4 speakers. Ahto Sachs. Ahto has been active in the field of IT and telecommunication for over 30 years. Since 2012, he has been working in the Chancellery of the Riigikogu, sorry for the name, as the head of the IT department, and since 2014 as the administrative director of the Riigikogu, the Parliament of Estonia. The purpose of the position of administrative director is to ensure the creation, implementation, and management of information technology solutions, supporting the activities of the Parliament and the Chancellery, creating the necessary condition for the Parliament to perform its task, organizing public procurement. Jonathan Ruckert. Jonathan is the founder and chief executive officer of NovaWorks. Under his leadership, NovaWorks has experienced exponential growth to become a leader in digital transformation initiatives for businesses and government. Jonathan has extensive experience advising parliaments globally on the digitalization of legislative processes and increasing transparency of government to citizens. Christopher Henry. Christopher is a senior leader of digital transformation at the House of Commons of Canada. His passion is focused on delivering innovative products and services to delight the members of Parliament. In his current role, Director of IT Business Products, he has leveraged a product-centric approach to enable his digital transformation vision across nearly every line of business at the House of Commons. His career has focused deeply in areas of product management, enterprise architecture, IT procurement, business relationship management, and software engineering. Alejandro Muñoz Sandoval. Alejandro is a systems engineer specialized in territorial government and public management. He is advisor in digital government policy, digital transformation framework, IT business architecture, and strategic planning of information technologies in the House of Representatives of Congress from Colombia. Dear colleagues, let's address the first domain, which is maintaining and developing hybrid environment. Each of the 5 questions that have been proposed will be answered around 3 minutes by each of the speakers. First one, the pandemic crisis forces us to digitalize massively our business processes, making use of video conference facilities, digital signatures, or remote voting systems. While we are now running this new normal world, do you think that the most important part of the business process digitalization is behind us or still raising a hand? I will give the floor to Ahto in order to have his thoughts about this question.
Thank you, Ludovic. So I will now begin. Whatever the crisis is, it should not be wasted. The COVID-19 pandemic crisis that started more than 2 years ago have been an interesting example and has been life-changing experience for all of us. What can we say about the crisis now? The crisis has changed us. We are no longer so anxious and do not rush to make any restrictions so easily. So we have learned to live with this crisis and with this pandemic. Also, the COVID disease itself has changed. It's not quite what it was at the beginning of the 2.5 years ago, and it will also definitely change in the next 2 years. Due to the COVID crisis, we have changes over many business processes. In 2020, when we were hit by the first COVID-19 wave, even the country of Estonia, which is perhaps the most digitized country in the world, was not ready for it. So none of us and none of everyone in the world was. And someone, I believe, digitalization got its start at that very moment when the COVID pandemic started. Overnight, new business goals emerged. The digitized parliamentary process in such a way that every task can all be used remotely. Of course, there was also a need for legal analysis, whatever, and what we can be done under the current laws. And it's also quite an important task. The next steps was to plan the technical steps that needed to be solved, the financial resources, of course, how the cyber risks could be mitigated. Very important goal for me was also already achieved efficiency and high automation. It should be stayed as it was. It was important that the majority business processes could be done from distance and not just only for the members of the parliament, for all the Chancellery. Of course, it was important to review our entire technical portfolio, since also the financial resources were limited. We did not want to waste any good solution, and everything that already implemented should merge to the new situation. Looking at it from another point of view, it is as if we had already been preparing for this crisis for the 20 years. Digitization for the Riigikogu has already started a long time ago. So nothing happens overnight. It took many years. For more than 10 years, all information exchange between the Riigikogu and the public sector had only been in digital form. Also, all the document signings has been done digital for a long time, which means that there is no need of physical sense anything on paper, and workflows in the processing of draft laws were also already on digital way. The remote work options that were already implemented and in use, it was possible to work from home anywhere in the world if there was an internet connection. But we were able to move most of our business needs to remote work. Decisions of the Riigikogu remained in the physical state, and quick analysis at the moment did not yield the good solutions for that. The new business goal was digitize the physical part of the Riigikogu sessions. Using all existing technical solutions and developing a highly integrated new remote solution, we created complete new video remote conferencing solution, and we're all ready for the next wave of COVID-19. Many of the sessions of the Riigikogu in 2021 took place using the new remote solution system. We could say that we have left behind the digitalization of our business process, but at the same time, everything that has already been done needs to be reviewed, improved, further developed, and business requirements also changed and over the time. After the digitalization was done, the continuous digitalization only started for us because you need to maintain, and it's a new form of life, everyday life. I hope so. It seems to me that it would like more like a cyber security, where do everything possible to mitigate known weaknesses and threats. And when you feel like you have done everything, but very next day, a new and even more important weakness threats will be found, and everything will start all over again. So you can always find something you need to digitize or re-digitize. So from that point, everything already starts. And now we are in the next crisis, the energy crisis, how we can benefit from it. I really do not know that. And I have not quite good answers yet, but maybe we should think about that what we can do next. Use less energy maybe, do not produce too much data. Not everything should be saved, stored for decades and shared. That's our choices. And whatever the crisis is, it should not be wasted. Thank you.
Thanks a lot. Yeah, I was mentioning a first crisis to kick off, but then you introduced a second one to continue. Christopher, what do you think about this statement?
Thank you, Ludovic. It's a wonderful question. Hybrid. It's funny, in the year 2020 when COVID first launched and we were catapulted into this, some of us a little less prepared than others, but I'll speak mainly of my experience at the House of Commons and looking back favorably of some of our strategies at the time, which saw some investments in our migration for certain key services to the cloud. Namely, I'll speak about Office 365 and how that was pivotal to enable us to move very quickly and mobilize our digital office environment quite quickly in rapid succession. If we were to compare ourselves at our legislature at the House of Commons in Canada to even our federal government agency departments, we were quite a bit more nimble and agile in enabling our members of parliament to and our staff, of course, to be productive within a week. Really, it was very quick, and a week was a full service operation. So that was a success early in the cloud environment, and then reality started to sink in, Ludovic, where those business processes you spoke of quickly became a question of, are we going to be automating and looking at our systems and digitization in the realm of how we were working prior to the pandemic, and looking really as, are there better ways to work and be a more integrated service and product environment at the House of Commons? And coincidentally, just a month before the pandemic arrived, we had just begun a transformation. We're all going through transformations, they never end. But our digital transformation at the House of Commons in Canada was really focused on looking differently on how we deliver our services and looking and sort of rethinking them from the inside out. Should we be focused on functional areas and lines of business in a sort of siloed approach, or should we be looking at a more integrative, immersive experience? So we really embarked upon productizing our entire IT environment, which I'm glad you teed it up in terms of focusing on the business more than the functions we do. And yes, our function in IT is all those fun stuff like architecture, design, development, testing, quality. We had a department, a silo for each of those, and we decided that we were not agile, we were not responsive, we were not able to respond to the insane pressures of our legislature and be viewed upon as a leading organization for that. So that's when the two universes collided, the pandemic, and then of course we're in the post-pandemic world, mixed with the pressures and need for rapid change. So that really enabled us from a hybrid experience to restructure ourselves, and at the right time, because our product environment that we created was a lot more insulated from the pressures of what I'll call a giant organization that had a lot of weak points. When we built nimble, small, dedicated, focused, co-located digitally, virtually co-located teams, we were able to focus on the nucleus of those services and deliver products and product changes quite quickly without the distractions or encumbrances that many of the challenges in the last 2 years could have brought to us. I'll speak namely about a system you were referring to, such as e-voting or e-signature, as an example of our agility. Like many of us in the room, we've had to adapt quite quickly to a digital environment, taking what I'll call long-standing business processes and looking them very closely and challenging the way and convention of the history and precedents of our organizations, and how we were able to influence that change was truly through what I'll call IT's new role, enterprise architecture's new role, which is focusing on business outcomes, being a digital business partner at the table. Business outcome oriented enterprise architecture is the future, according to the successes we've gained, focusing on those key performance indicators, or as many are calling them synonymously, objective key results of how we can focus and bring our business partners together, and us from IT, from the digital expertise that we can bring. Specifically about e-voting, the longstanding business acumen and knowledge that we gained as an architecture team through 20 years of iterative and innovative reforms of many of our digital systems at the House of Commons. Within 3 months, we were able to turn around a working model of a e-voting system, where we weren't just taking the paper or the call it classic way of doing things, and really looking at all angles: security, the digital signature and footprint, all of the obvious rules of business and procedure, in respecting those, but mashing together a new outcome that was performant, secure, and corresponding to the business needs of our organization, all within these tiger teams that we created of digital product transformation. Was an outstanding success, so much to the point where even in a post-pandemic world, as we're evolving to whatever it may become, our members of parliament are still hanging on very tightly to a solution that we've built, which is not just easy to use, but a delight to use. And that's a testament to a lot of the things we've done here together. I'll just say one more thing. I don't want to hog the whole floor, but on e-signature, it's one thing, a myth that we've been trying to dispel in the digitization of and rethinking of signatures altogether. I mean, if I had a piece of paper here in my paperless office, I would show you how I used to sign. But our new thought is, am I truly signing as Christopher Henry, or am I more so authorizing with my digital identity a transaction, a workflow? We need to educate our business partners around thinking and rethinking the game, more so around a authorization experience of who I am as an authorized, secure digital identity to enable the good work, to enable the approvals of our organization. With that, Ludovic, my speech is done.
Thank you very much. Some things that we do not hear very frequently, but pretty interesting. Jonathan, what does it bring to your mind, the two previous reactions?
Yeah, I think it's interesting with the pandemic. A lot of parliaments which we've been talking to have been thinking about digitalization for years and years and years, or moving to the cloud, and they've always had a thought about it. But obviously, when the pandemic hit, they suddenly actually had to have what I like to say is forced change. They had to do something about it. So, and when you look at the most important part of it, the process, or the business process digitalization, when you look at is it behind us? I think it's a rolling curve. There's always going to be something that needs to be updated, or if you look at the history of parliaments and legislative authorities, they've been around for hundreds and hundreds of years. So the institution itself has to obviously learn to adapt. And what we do find is that obviously with proper change management and whatnot, that it does, once you actually give training and to staff and you actually give it to the members of parliament or the Congress, etc., that you find it hard to take it back, which is a good thing. So, and the other sort of experiences which we have also had is that sometimes, as we all know, in IT, technology can fail. So, we have seen in the past, some instances where the e-voting system, hasn't been working, as an example. So they have to revert back to paper because Parliament has to actually keep on working, for that 10-minute period whilst they're actually voting, as an example. So, it's understanding that I think even with digitization, there has to be a level of flexibility in terms of how the actual Parliament is run, to make sure that, if everything is working in a perfect world, that you have got also fail safes as part of that process. So if the digital signatures don't work, or we had an interesting conversation with an African nation where they would have to change the constitution because they actually have to vote with their voice, which is a really interesting thing. So when we have a look at an e-voting solution where they're clicking on a button to say yes or aye or no or abstain, they actually have to use their voice as part of their constitution. So it's looking at the whole sort of institution itself to really work out what that sort of, evolving state of the digitalization of the business processes are.
Yeah, perfectly right. The question of legal context and digital identity is a serious point in digital transformation. You're absolutely right. Alejandro, what's your view from Colombia on these elements introduced?
Bueno, muy buenos días. Un saludo muy especial para todos los colegas y toda la audiencia que nos escucha en este importante evento. Iniciar diciéndoles que definitivamente para nosotros en Colombia, creo que como a la mayoría del mundo, el tema de COVID pues fue un tema que nos cogió por sorpresa, nos tomó por sorpresa, en el sentido de que por supuesto no estábamos preparados para asumir este reto de confinamiento. Yo quiero referirme específicamente al rol y a la misionalidad de la Cámara de Representantes en Colombia y hablar de la transformación digital y de lo que significó para la entidad tener que llevar a cabo nuevos procesos en el tema, por ejemplo, de tener que sesionar de manera virtual de un momento a otro. Si bien es cierto que la Cámara en Colombia había tenido unos inicios de su transformación con, por ejemplo, trabajo colaborativo al interior de la parte administrativa, no estábamos preparados para la parte legislativa, es decir, cómo debatir y aprobar las leyes de manera virtual, de manera remota. Quizás este fue el reto más importante para nosotros y decir, bueno, desde el punto de vista legal, había que hacer, se venía haciendo o lo correcto, la razón de ser era que las votaciones y las aprobaciones de ley había que hacerlas de manera presencial. Y ahí fue cuando el Departamento de TI de la Cámara de Representantes en Colombia tuvimos que reaccionar de manera supremamente rápida para decir, ¿y cómo vamos a hacer si ahora estamos confinados, pero la entidad no puede parar? Tiene que continuar su labor legislativa y tiene que seguir debatiendo y aprobando las leyes. Quizás ese fue el reto más importante. Y ahí fue cuando de manera rápida el grupo de TI reaccionó y comenzamos utilizando lo que teníamos en su momento y lo fuimos, digamos, afinando, que fue la G Suite colaborativa de Gmail, que ya teníamos, la entidad ya tenía su correo electrónico y pues eso nos permitía de una u otra manera facilitar el trabajo colaborativo y de una manera muy ágil se desarrollaron unas pequeñas herramientas que a través de, por ejemplo, con Meet, se adaptaron los procesos de registro y de voto electrónico, que era muy importante que la ley quedara aprobada y fue los primeros desarrollos que iniciamos con el fin de que la labor y el core del negocio de la Cámara de Representantes no podía parar. Eso fue muy importante y a través del tiempo lo fuimos mejorando y a hoy pues ya tenemos, digamos, el recorrido de 2 años y en 2 años podemos decir que la Cámara de Representantes tuvo el tiempo necesario para afinar sus procesos, para acoplar sus procesos a estos tecnologías híbridas y hoy en día tenemos una plataforma tecnológica, una solución tecnológica supremamente estable con temas muy importantes y relevantes como el tema de la seguridad de la información, que es supremamente clave en estos temas, pero tuvimos el tiempo necesario. Tuvimos el tiempo necesario para ir desarrollando, para ir implementando los procesos, ya no tanto, digamos, por supuesto, a nivel legislativo, pero yendo a la parte administrativa también. La Cámara es una entidad bastante grande y también cómo ir al interior de la entidad acoplando y adaptando los procesos para que este trabajo no solamente sea colaborativo, sino híbrido, y que fuera transparente para el usuario, para el congresista, y que hoy en día pueda funcionar de manera transparente. Es decir, hoy en día la Cámara tiene una solución tecnológica que no se nota o no se percibe si se está trabajando de manera presencial o de manera remota. Eso lo logramos con una solución tecnológica muy importante. Y para decir que si esos procesos son parte del pasado o que si aún nos falta temas por recorrer, yo creo que todavía nos falta mucho por recorrer. Aquí en Colombia hemos logrado, como les he dicho, un camino muy importante que nos obligó el tema del COVID y que hoy en día está estable, pero creemos que parte de los procesos, tanto legislativos como administrativos, aún están por desarrollar, aún están por integrarse unos con otros. Creemos que el tema de transparencia, que el tema de gobierno abierto, que el tema hacia el ciudadano, el permitirle que los ciudadanos tengan acceso a la información pública, ahí es donde estamos trabajando y creemos que es un camino que aún está en construcción, que aún tenemos que recorrer. Creemos, por ejemplo, que hoy en día, ya con todos estos desarrollos tecnológicos y todo lo que la pandemia permitió de manera positiva, nos va a permitir llegarle más al ciudadano. Por ejemplo, un reto que tenemos ahora en la Cámara es que el tema de sesiones plenarias y el tema de votaciones, de los resultados de votaciones, los podamos publicar de manera en tiempo real, por ejemplo, en nuestro sitio web. Eso nos garantiza el tema de transparencia, de gobierno abierto, y creemos que hacia allá es donde el siguiente paso que la Cámara de Representantes puede dar.
Thank you very much. It's true that in this context, a strong push to solutions already available. So software as a service of software from the market was a key driver to implement rapid changes in this domain. And as I see, you still have some paths to go in implement these digital changes. Thanks a lot for your feedback. And you give me the hand for the next question and the next domain to address, which is cybersecurity. Cyber attacks have grown in number, frequency, and complexity. In the same time, cybersecurity department recognizes the high benefit of enterprise architecture associated with risk and compliance management. Is your organization bridging both the cybersecurity and enterprise architecture domains? Christopher, I'd like to have your feeling on that.
Great question, Ludovic. I think you're hitting an important topic where, just kind of building upon my last comments, we were not prepared, if I'm going to be blunt and honest, for the resilience within business and service lines for true cyber threats and risks. Relying solely on a dedicated practice of cybersecurity for all aspects, including data integrity, compromise, is simply not a working model for an organization. It's wonderful for the initial response and initial threat detection, but we've taken since, as we've been on our digital transformation, an approach of responsibilizing all of our digital product teams for the cybersecurity accountability of their products and services, while working very closely, of course, with our core practice of cybersecurity, so that it's a team-based, mesh-based approach, insofar as that the teams work together to have warm handoffs of threats and risks. Just give you an example of that, Ludovic, is that on a monthly basis now, with our cybersecurity team in practice, we have practitioners through a community of practice we've established in our product lines that enable a flow of communication, information, threat, risk assessments from our core cyber teams to percolate into our teams, so that all of the information of upcoming threats and risks are understood and risk is assessed and measured in terms of action that is required to take to secure the products that obviously run our services. So one thing we've done further than just sharing of information is putting the tools, those very expensive, wonderful cyber tools, in the hands of our classic software engineers, architects, not just cyber professionals, but let's call them product managers, developers, engineers, so that they're not so much saying, well, that's cyber sex issue, that's their problem to manage that. No, it is not. It's their core practice and their expertise, but they don't know the data. They don't know the system. They don't know the workflows and the signatures of your products. You do. And moreover, you know your code. And the code that you manufacture and produce is a threat and a risk in itself if it's not done properly. So we've done a two-pronged approach of threat and risk prevention, and also on the outgoing nature of, as we publish new code base, deploy new systems, we must ensure, of course, that those are resilient and protected as well. So it's a great question. Are we there yet? There's no such thing. As you said, cyber threats never sleep. It's a true 24/7 job now, including, as I've said, the percolation of that ownership into teams that aren't just classic cybersecurity. So it's keeping me up at night too, not just my friends who run our cybersecurity team.
You're right. I can imagine that it never stops, and there's always something new. So it's a very challenging domain. Alejandro, were you ready for that in Colombia?
Bien, yo creo que para responder si la ciberseguridad está enmarcada o articulada con la arquitectura empresarial o la arquitectura de TI, quiero decirles que en Colombia sí contamos con las normas, los lineamientos y los procedimientos que están enmarcados en una gran política que se llama la política de gobierno digital. Digamos, esa es una política de Estado. Y dentro de los cuales se destaca, por supuesto, el tema del modelo de seguridad y privacidad de la información como algo lo más importante y relevante, que es los datos y la información de las entidades. Y por supuesto que este modelo de seguridad sí está articulado con la arquitectura de TI. Nosotros, dentro de la entidad, antes de la pandemia, habíamos hecho nuestro ejercicio de arquitectura empresarial para poder determinar el estado del arte, la situación actual de cómo estábamos, particularmente en temas de seguridad, y ya habíamos avanzado, es decir, nosotros ya teníamos nuestra situación actual y sabíamos de qué éramos vulnerables, qué bondades teníamos y qué nos hacía falta. Decir que eso fue muy importante haber hecho este ejercicio de arquitectura de TI antes de la pandemia, porque eso ya nos alertó de lo que teníamos que hacer. Y eso nos llevó digamos, a trabajar en varios aspectos. Uno de ellos era la inversión que teníamos que hacer en infraestructura de hardware, por ejemplo. Digamos, cómo teníamos que proteger nuestros centros de datos que en ese momento estaban en un data center físico, allí en el Capitolio, pero también el modelo de transformación digital nos llevó a dar el paso a que la información de la entidad, a que los sistemas de información de misión crítica migráramos a la nube. Y eso nos daba una tranquilidad, porque si bien es cierto que la nube pues no es el 100%, no es que no sea vulnerable, también lo es, pero ya nos da una tranquilidad en que sí tenemos una seguridad mayor en la nube. Y esa migración fue haciéndose de manera gradual durante la pandemia. Y, y creemos que el tema de ciberseguridad, de hecho, en la Cámara en Colombia no hemos tenido afortunadamente ataques externos ni vulneraciones. Y bueno, creo que de una u otra manera sí estábamos preparados. El camino, como lo dije anteriormente, lo seguimos construyendo, pero en temas de ciberseguridad y de la infraestructura que la entidad necesita, nos falta temas de gestión del que hablaremos adelante, que es un tema que va articulado con todo esto, para acostumbrarnos a estos nuevos modelos y a estos nuevos esquemas, pero creemos que toda nuestra infraestructura y nuestros servicios de infraestructura están soportados con temas de seguridad digital.
Yes, you are perfectly right on that. And one of my good friends in cybersecurity always tells me, well, if you don't find issues in cybersecurity or incident, it doesn't mean that they don't happen. It just means that you don't see them. that's the difficulty of cybersecurity and people being very inventive in this domain. Jonathan, from your side, what does cybersecurity inspires you?
Yeah, it's a very close topic to my heart, to be honest with you, cybersecurity. Like I'm very, very passionate about this particular space as well. And what we're sort of finding as a trend over the last couple of years is that cybersecurity is now becoming what we sort of call a first-class citizen. So when you look at enterprise architecture, you build security and build cybersecurity into your models. You build it into your business requirements. You don't have it as an afterthought. And that to me is actually a really fundamental thing, which we're seeing a lot of transitioning from the traditional software development approach, where you might just say, I'm going to develop this feature and then release it out and see what happens, sort of thing. And it's really about sort of taking that ownership. And we used to talk about occupational health and safety, where safety, as a sort of personal safety is always, everyone's responsibility. Whereas we're now seeing that cybersecurity is now everyone's responsibility. So whether it's a member of parliament or whether it's a cleaner in the office, it literally is anybody's responsibility, is actually related to cybersecurity as well. And of course, security is also a business risk as well, because as everyone knows, cybersecurity tools are extremely expensive, or can be extremely expensive. And also if you look at, for example, the Microsoft sort of platform, some of their sort of statistics say, well, they're processing trillions of data points per day. And if you look at it like from a parliament's perspective, is that, do you have the skill sets to actually know what those trillion plus points are actually about? It's actually really understanding that you might be collecting all this data in, but really understanding, well, how do you actually then use that as well in a meaningful way? As you sort of said, like you might actually have a trigger that you may not know is actually somebody's trying to get in, as an example. So it's a really interesting, you know, sort of part of that process. And also one of the other trends which we're also seeing a lot, and I also recommend this to other parliaments as well, is that any sort of software as a service that you're looking at purchasing, or any vendor which you're actually looking at engaging with, make sure you do a cybersecurity assessment on them and on their business. So are they, you know, ISO 27001 2013 certified? You know, and have they actually got good hygiene when it comes to cybersecurity within their own company? Because when you let another company into your domain, you're by extension increasing your risk profile onto them as well, and allowing them to actually interact with you is actually a risk as well. And what we sort of recommend is that for parliaments is to develop into their own contracts and their legal frameworks when they engage with vendors, what is your standard set of cybersecurity requirements which you must adhere to as a vendor as well. So we're seeing a lot more movement around cybersecurity, and I was reading a recent sort of Gartner white paper around this. And when you look at deploying software or applications or new applications from the get-go, when it's actually in the design period, and when you then look at the deployment and the cost to actually have to introduce or fix a security issue back to base, you know, is in the order of magnitude of about 900% extra of cost. You know, so if you fix your security and put the security into the design up front, you can actually save a significant amount of rework and cost or pain, or security or data breaches, you know, in the future, if you think about it up front as part of that design process.
Yeah, absolutely. The question of integrating tools and software services increases rapidly your risk profile in something which is not always clearly assessed. Or people want to go fast, like in the COVID-19 situation, and to go fast, you buy software or you use software as a service, but you have no time to perform the cybersecurity assessment, and then just being blind on this domain, which is quite important for your activity.
And shadow IT, and you know, absolutely, what we call shadow IT. Yeah,
totally. And Ahto, from one of the most digitized country in the world, cybersec, your point.
Thank you. So I believe that we should bridge the cybersecurity and enterprise architecture. But as we all know, that the cybersecurity goals and solutions are often opposite direction with the business requirements. So, and the win-win solutions we will find with the right balance, or saying building bridges between the cybersecurity and business requirements. It's very easy to describe threats and frighten everyone, and that's say to impossible, and that it's everything is unsecure. But more challenging, I believe, is find to secure solutions to every business tasks and continue your business in a new way. Sometimes maybe it's the right position accepting some risk if we want to save some lives. We should build the bridges, work together to make working and secure solutions. Thanks.
Yeah, absolutely. You're right. It's not only risks, it's risk management when you want to assess, but then when it's realized, it becomes incident management, and this is largely worse and could largely harm your organization. So yeah, it's true that that's domains that have to be reinforced. It's very often seen as slowing down processes. When you want to go fast and you say you will have a cybersecurity assessment, and people say, oh, it will take time, and they will make comments, and they will ask to change things, and the code will not be clean, and we have to recode something that we already done, but it works. Why do they want to do that? Okay, it's fair enough until you just discover that there is a major threat. This threat will be evaluated through a risk, and then this risk will occur as an incident. In this case, everybody will come back and say, well, maybe something could have been done before to avoid that, and the investment, because it's a real investment you did before, then will pay in order to prevent this kind of situation. So you are definitively right on that. Let's move now to the driving of changes. Another colleague, and I have a lot of colleagues talking, and that's great. Another colleague told me that, and he wants to remain anonymous for that. He said the difficult part of digital transformation isn't technology, but change management. And to be honest, I cannot disagree with my colleague. When dealing with large-scale digital transformation, how do you set the priorities in your organization? Alejandro, how do you perform in the Colombian Congress?
Me corresponde, ¿verdad? Sí, ok. Gracias. No, coincido plenamente con su reflexión. La gestión del cambio es definitivamente uno de los aspectos más difíciles de lograr dentro de las organizaciones. Podemos tener la mejor infraestructura de tecnología, los mejores equipos, el mejor networking, los mejores sistemas de información, pero definitivamente si no cambiamos la cultura, si no trabajamos en la dirección de hacerle entender a nuestros funcionarios, a nuestros parlamentarios, que eso les facilita el trabajo, que los vuelve más eficientes, que pueden hacer el trabajo en menos tiempo, y eso está representado en calidad de vida. Creemos que nos estamos quedando incompletos en el proceso. ¿Qué hacemos para abordar esta problemática de la gestión del cambio? Yo propongo 4 puntos que podríamos abordar en cada una de las organizaciones. El primero de ellos es diseñar una estrategia que incluya inicialmente el sentido de urgencia, es decir, que hay que hacerlo, que esto no da espera, que el cambio no da espera, que tenemos que asumirlo, y para ello debemos conformar un equipo interdisciplinario para asumir ese reto del cambio, de estructurar esa visión del cambio. Es decir, y para eso, pues tenemos que comenzar brindando, por ejemplo, los beneficios que uno espera. Cuando se hace una inversión en tecnología y tenemos, por ejemplo, en Colombia, que hicimos una transformación digital en todo el proceso de infraestructura para el tema legislativo, tendríamos que hacerles entender estos beneficios. Por ejemplo, en tiempo. Quiero decirles, por ejemplo, que en Colombia, en la Cámara de Representantes, un proceso de votación que se hacía en una sesión plenaria de nosotros, acá en Colombia, la Cámara en este momento tiene 188 congresistas. Este proceso de votación que se hacía llamando a lista podía demorar 30 minutos, 45 minutos, a veces 1 hora. Con el nuevo sistema que es totalmente automático, digital, que se hace por reconocimiento facial, por ejemplo, en el momento de la autenticación del parlamentario, puede demorar máximo 5 minutos. Entonces, cuando uno muestra estas bondades de esta tecnología, puede hacer ver estos resultados en tiempo, en la calidad de la información, en la seguridad de la información, en la eficiencia en el proceso, en temas económicos, etcétera. Es decir, que esta estrategia tenemos que diseñarla a un grupo interdisciplinario para comunicarla. Ese es el primer punto. El segundo es motivarlos. Es decir, es vender estas bondades. Es decir, que vender las bondades de la solución dentro del proceso. Por ejemplo, les decía, el tema de seguridad, el tema de eficiencia, de rapidez, la facilidad de uso, la parametrización de los sistemas. Y algo muy importante acá de motivar, por ejemplo, eran los funcionarios que estaban encargados de la transcripción de la plenaria. Aquí en Colombia puede demorarse una plenaria 8 horas y tenían que, de manera manual, escuchar la grabación para transcribir y hacer el acta, por ejemplo. Hoy en día, con el sistema que tenemos, que utiliza inteligencia artificial, esta transcripción se hace en tiempo real y este trabajo lo puede hacer la revisión, los transcriptores en 1 hora y no en un día que gastaban. Entonces, uno tiene que motivar al grupo de interés y decirles las bondades que tiene la implementación tecnológica. Y eso, de todas maneras, esa motivación hace que tomen el cambio como algo positivo. Adicional a eso, hacer un entrenamiento. Es decir, lograr una adecuada transferencia del conocimiento es clave acá. A veces en temas tan técnicos de tecnología, este entrenamiento y este transferencia de conocimiento es básica, es fundamental, es saberla transmitir. Pero para ello hay que identificar las habilidades de los grupos de interés. Entonces uno tiene que identificar, y este grupo interdisciplinario que se creó para la gestión del cambio tiene que identificar las habilidades, y identificando las habilidades podemos llegar a una transferencia de conocimiento mucho más eficiente para que sepan que esta herramienta o esta solución o esta plataforma dentro de un proceso les va a mejorar sus condiciones laborales, por ejemplo. Y por último, es reforzar, es decir, dentro de este proceso de gestión del cambio, que es un proceso gradual y que puede llevar cierto tiempo, porque no es fácil cambiar las formas de cómo hacían las cosas o como las han venido haciendo durante mucho y largo tiempo. ¿Cómo podemos decir que las vamos a cambiar? Y eso se hace de manera gradual. Pero para eso tenemos que reforzar este entrenamiento, esta transferencia de conocimiento, estas estrategias y apuntar, por ejemplo, a victorias tempranas. Algo importante es decir, bueno, vamos a apuntar a victorias tempranas y una vez vamos analizando eso, es sostenernos a largo plazo. Es decir, cómo podemos estabilizar el proceso, este cambio gradual y finalmente recalcar en la importancia del por qué el cambio y de que el cambio realmente funcionó. Entonces, básicamente, creo que eso era lo que nosotros, y de hecho en la Cámara de Representantes estamos implementando en nuestra gestión del cambio.
Yeah, absolutely. The way to introduce, among other things, benefit management is critical for the prioritization of the changes. Christopher, how did you see it from Canada?
Well, change is easy unless there's humans involved, which is the entirety of the dilemma at hand, right? Human beings, I'll speak as one myself. Change is hard for us as humans. We have a tendency to like things to be predictable, comfortable. Being uncomfortable is not great. That in itself is, I think, a paradigm for a lot of the challenges that businesses, enterprises, parliaments face is that in the world we live in, change is omnipresent, but at the end of the day, we're still human beings trying to adapt to that. So as leaders, what have we done? What have I done at the House of Commons in Canada to kind of nurture a change journey of adaptability and constant readiness for change? Well, I'll give you a few insights that I've shared, experienced, leveraged through my journey. The number one is understanding that it's personal for each and every person, employee, and it's different for each one. With that comes a powerful leadership tool I've been using recently. It's called a buzzword of empathy and being empathetic to the change, understanding whether it's the breakneck speed of digitization, whether it's here in Canada right now, we're going through a big change with our return to office strategies and pulling people out of their comfortable abodes. and that is tough. That is a very tough conversation. I've had wonderful challenging conversations of change with our teams. I have a big team meeting tomorrow to basically spend an hour and a half just about this topic. So if we are just talking about humans and their ability to change, and then we layer on the subjects of enterprise architecture, and we layer on cybersecurity and all the things we've discussed today, it creates a soup that is very murky, very maybe not so tasty sometimes, that we're going to have to find some spices to make it a little more enjoyable. So some things we've been using is a learning approach, the classic agile methodology. It applies to change too from my experiences. So one example we've been doing for our return to office strategy is taking a step, getting the feedback, having surveys, having the voice of our employees come out so that we can understand, assess, reflect, exert some empathy into the situations they face, and then make another decision, make another change in response to that. Sometimes, and reality is, the change doesn't always go to each individual's way, but showing that you've been empathetic and attuned to the needs, and from all of the factors and variables at hand, that decisions have been made very carefully, very calculated to pursue a path that is in the best interests of the organization and the employees is, I feel, the right way to do it. If I was to speak a little more pointedly around the dilemmas of enterprise architecture and digital business, the number one point that I'll make to your question, Ludovic, is when we set out as an organization to change and prioritize that change, are we doing that well? I'll be blunt. From a corporate perspective here at the House of Commons, there's a lot of varying, differing opinions on where the business value of the change should be. And quite honestly, we don't spend enough time calculating, proposing, and then measuring that business value and the outcomes that come from it as we mobilize an incredible workforce of people toward that change. How successful have we been? Why are we feeling we need to change it again? Did we set it out properly in the first place to really head down a direction that we were all agreeing to? What will happen if we are not all on the same page toward true priorities of our organization? Well, it was mentioned already, shadow IT is what I'll call will rear its ugly head. Well, I don't agree as a leader of this unit that that's the direction. I'm just going to go that way. And I have a credit card and I can call up a cloud service provider to help me out with that change, because that's the change that I believe in. So these are symptoms of organizations that aren't on the same page, do not spend enough time properly proposing, working together, and then walking down a change path together. These are just some of the insights I've shared. Ludovic, I want to respect the time of my colleagues, but this is a big topic, very close to my heart.
Yeah, it's true that at one moment people were all talking about how can we put people teleworking or in remote offices. And right now the question is, how do we bring them back? Another point of view. Jonathan, what do you think about that?
More change.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it was a very interesting comment, actually, that Alejandro, you made around Hansard. We actually, about a couple of months ago, we were talking with a group of Hansard reporters, and we also use artificial intelligence to formulate the first draft. And the first comment we had from one of the reporters was, "I don't have a job anymore." You know, and that's the way which they were sort of viewing change, as in, so if you know, if you don't talk to staff and involve them in the process, then it's all about, you know, from a change management point of view, you've got to look at it from the staff point of view and say, you know, how does this affect me, you know, as a human? And really, once you start to actually understand that side of things, it's about how you then tackle innovation, how you can actually communicate that effectively, you know, with your wider team. And, you know, with the Hansard sort of side of things was that, you know, it wasn't about the artificial intelligence, which was, you know, a really cool thing from an IT point of view, you know, to actually get some efficiency and whatnot. For us, it was actually then the business decision behind that was so that the Hansard staff could actually focus on editing the actual content instead of having to listen, you know, back to content for 8 hours straight every single day and having to either type or repeat that with, you know, dictation software as an example. So trying to make sure that we're improving their quality of life or the quality of their job and their job satisfaction. And so instead of, say, doing what we call mundane tasks or very basic tasks, we can actually improve their you know, work life and their work-life balance, so they're actually focusing on things which they actually enjoy. So I think, you know, change management, you know, and one of the sort of classic sayings with change management is that you have to sometimes repeat something, you know, 10 times to someone before they can actually absorb that as content as well. So I think, you know, definitely what you're sort of saying around Christopher, around using empathy, you know, listening to people, understanding, taking that on board are really, really important factors when we do look at change management.
Absolutely, I fully agree. And there we are talking about training for adults and not training for teenagers. It takes a little bit more time and things need also sometimes to be repeated. Let's move to the next topic, and if you can provide answers in 2 minutes. Competition for talents. The most frequent challenge managers are facing is finding great IT staff. And in all IT domain, the requested workforce is not in line with the talent pool. How do you innovate to capture these new talents in your organization? Jonathan, quite critical in your domain if you want to kick off.
Yeah, it is. So I think there's two aspects which I look around staff and staff retention as well, is that, you know, especially with the evolution of cloud or evolution with digitization, is really invest in your own staff. Like, one of the biggest things you're trying to avoid is you don't want to lose your existing staff. They have a lot of business process knowledge. They have a lot of knowledge which, you know, especially in parliamentary spaces, are very hard to find. You know, one of the, like, we've been working with parliaments for nearly 20+ years, and it's really interesting when we talk with a new vendor who's never worked with parliament before. We have to go through all the terminology, all of the business processes, everything like that. And, you know, parliaments get very frustrated very quickly because you have to repeat the same thing over and over again. But what we're trying to say is, I think that, you know, to obviously attract new staff as well into an organization, is that it is a very competitive market. And, you know, by utilizing emerging technology or utilizing, you know, not archaic processes, or, you know, something which is going to spark some interest so they can develop as a career in the parliament or the legislative authority, I think is really important. So what is the parliament actually doing from an innovation point of view? Like I was sort of on a debate yesterday where one of the parliaments was actively working with universities, actively working with academics, and it was a really fascinating conversation which we're having around their involvement and their utilization of other government agencies to develop this wider sort of net, you know, even across different agencies as well.
Yeah, fully agreed, and it's great that that you point out that you have to also show the benefits for the talents to join your organization, trying to avoid to lose them. Ahto, do you also have this issue in Estonia where you have a lot of IT skilled people to find these talents to work for your parliament?
Actually, yes, we have a lot of this IT skilled people, but a lot of them are working for abroad, not for the parliament in Estonia, so we have to compete with them. Yes, this is a quite hard question. So we also try to show us as an innovative organization, and if you have adopting something new system or something, at least maybe even something which related to artificial intelligence. We'll create some news, and sometimes even we could break in the evening news, and it shows us that we are thinking and we are innovative. Also, that our financial resources are quite limited. We can't compete with the high salaries in the market with the company who is working in the market. Also, our staff has many different tasks, so to feel that we can't also afford for every domain some specific specialists. Also, I have many different tasks which I shouldn't do in this position. So work here is sometimes challenging. And also keeping the quite good people in the organization, it's sometimes even the harder task as well. We have found many younger people from the school bench. Like actually, they might even study there in the school yet, but they are working with. They are started working for us. They usually work for many years, and our company or our organization may be too narrow for them as for the first working experience, and they leave a few years. So yes, it's quite a hard task for us also.
Yeah, you have many IT experts, but you also have many companies requesting them.
Yes.
So it's hard to consult.
All the work works for the abroad.
Yeah, Christopher, I know that your colleague, on which I had very frequently talk about the question of human resources, would be delighted to have this question. But what do you think about that? Grabbing talents, keeping them?
Yeah, let's talk about the elephant in the room, the Great Resignation. Has it passed? Is it still rearing its ugly head? I'd say we're not out of the woods, and many of us are losing wonderful, talented people. And I guess the first change that I would propose is to not view it as losing, but folks, I think across industry are exploring and understanding what is meaningful to them for a reflection of their own lives, of where they want to put their purpose and their work. And that's sort of the dovetail to my main argument here for us as employers, as talent hiring managers, is what is your mission? What is your purpose? What is your attraction to bring a bright mind into your organization who's eager and passionate to do the good work? And that actually, that question I asked myself, and I said, geez, I've got to really ratchet up my mission statements for my team. And when I'm doing a recruiting session, I have precious few minutes with a wonderful opportunity of a new employee. How am I going to sell our organization to them and make them really see the benefits of working where we do? And that's number one, dusting off your corporate mission statements to make sure that it's very clear to you, so that as we build as leaders our own mission and team statements, that you unequivocally understand that statement as a value statement for yourself and to your team. You sell and live the vision. The other massive piece to that is meaningful work. Moreover than salary and benefits and all the other monetary and tangibilities, is people genuinely want to have purpose and meaning, and at the end of the day, be proud of the things they do and accomplish. So do we have that work for them, or can we show them what that type of work will look like? Can we remind our teams, our existing talent, in terms of retention, of the purpose and mission we fulfill every day as very sacred roles we each carry? The other, I think Jonathan mentioned, investment in skills is paramount. And the risk, of course, is, yes, all that investment you may lose in terms of a wonderful employee you've invested in and they've moved on. That's just part of the game. If we all did that, though, we would all be benefiting from each other's investments. We would have a workplace full of skilled workers to leverage. And that's how I see it. If no one wanted our employees, we weren't doing something right. If everyone wants our employees, well, we have another problem now. But at least we're bringing really great talent into the marketplace, and we should be happy about that. The other thing I do, just like I would with my children or my partner, is doing that check-in in terms of our career, our relationship. How are we doing? Do we have a future together? Is that clear? Is that understood of where your role, our role together goes into the future? If that's not clear, we've got a problem as well. We must understand what tomorrow and 5 years and 10 years could look like if we continue on the journey together. We talked about HR. That is so pivotal these days, is wonderful rapport and relationships with human resources teams. We've done some innovation recently with a lot of hiring, staffing competitions that have gone dry. Many good candidates, but we lose them at the last minute. Why? Are we too slow? Are our processes for recruitment lacking? We've done some experiments on getting our hiring managers directly involved, such as going to universities, doing a little bit of job fair and looking at our student hiring pools, going on LinkedIn directly and not waiting for HR to post something, but getting their collaboration and doing posts where we can fully give the message, not through the messenger of what this job will be. And lastly, I'll speak of public sector challenges in terms of the way we operate. Salaries will never be competitive, as we know, fully with private sector. Where benefits come in, we've seen some erosions lately in Canada around our benefits. So I think an untapped area of potential is around, especially I mentioned the return to office, being empathetic to my teams around flexibility, and preserving elements of flexibility is key, because I see that's what really people are looking for these days, is that flexibility to continue as they've had an experiment in the last 2 years. Can we be flexible as employers to continue down a road of flexibility? That's what I had to say, Ludovic.
And you're perfectly in line with Sofiane Ben Moussa, to whom I frequently ask a question in Canada and provide almost the same answer. So you're already on the same line. Alejandro, do you have also
notes? We just think similarly.
Yeah. Alejandro, do you have also this point about talent management?
Sí, gracias. Yo coincido en muchos temas con Christopher. El tema de contar con talentos, con gente capacitada en el área de TI no es sencillo. De hecho, en nuestra entidad, en la Cámara de Representantes en Colombia, quiero contarles que existe una alta rotación de personal. Ese es dentro de nuestro tema de arquitectura de TI, está totalmente, plenamente identificado. Es tal vez uno de los temas que nos preocupa, en que el personal rota demasiado, y pues eso tiene que ver mucho con la misionalidad del Congreso, el tema legislativo y político, y por tal razón nosotros, ese es un tema que lo tenemos dentro de lo que tenemos que avanzar, de lo que iniciamos nuestra charla de si los temas de transformación son parte del pasado, ya los superamos. Resulta que no. Este es el tema de recurso humano. Para nosotros es un tema que está en desarrollo, que lo estamos analizando, y que desde el punto de vista en Colombia creemos que tenemos que hacer una reforma administrativa al interior de la entidad para garantizar primero estabilidad laboral, para crear cargos de carrera administrativa, que los hay pocos dentro del área de TI, y eso generaría esta estabilidad para tener gente con talento. Pero para eso tenemos que articular, por ejemplo, otros colegas, que hay que competir con el sector privado, Generalmente los salarios y las condiciones pueden ser en algunos casos mejores que en el sector público. El tema de el mejoramiento continuo y la capacitación que se le debe dar a los profesionales, es decir, planes de capacitación continua y mejoramiento continuo en competencias laborales. Es decir, que es un proceso que tenemos que ir paulatinamente construyendo, pero como les digo, al menos el caso de Colombia en la Cámara de Representantes sí obedece a una reforma legislativa al interior del tema administrativo para contar con gente talentosa y, como decían los otros colegas, permitir que siempre estén a nuestro servicio y que no tengan las iniciativas de irse o de no querer estar en la entidad por los temas que hemos planteado.
Yeah, that you're absolutely right. It's not only a question of identifying the talents, but also to keep them, to train them appropriately, and to show them that there is also a meaning within the organization. It's what your job will impact. And then we are working in parliaments, we are impacting democratic continuity. And this is basically what we are working for, supporting democratic processes through the legislation. So this is an important meaning from our societies. Dear colleagues, I would like to warmly thank you for all your interventions. Very often, there's a restriction of enterprise architecture as a kind of cake. You have a cake of 4 layers. Everybody will tell you, okay, Farrell, you're talking about enterprise architecture. What do you point out? Is it the business layer, the information system layer, or is it the data layer or the infrastructure layer? And this is what many people see enterprise architecture being a restriction to this slice model. But all the exchanges that we had today and all your comments have clearly shown that it's largely broader than that. Enterprise architecture is not a small piece of cake composed of 4 layers. It's much more diverse than that. It's much more integrated inside the organization. And it's absolutely not only an IT perspective. It's a mix of business consideration with IT tools or IT processes that will come in order to support the transformation of the organization. So I would like to warmly thank you, Jonathan, Christopher, Ahto, and Alejandro. This has been really a pleasure to be with you today for this session on enterprise architecture. And I'm pretty sure that was very interesting for the participants, and everybody will look at this session afterwards.